You don't know much about it because many governments spend a huge amount of money trying to keep it secret. As a result, when I was thinking about how the world worked, I didn't necessarily have a lot of facts. I had, a meeting with a spy here, a report there, perhaps a news article here, a conference there. And based on these very few pieces of data, I had to craft an overarching vision for how the world worked and what the United States should do about it. This is a really difficult task, but it's almost exactly what you must do in Model UN, right? In Model UN, you're never going to understand everything walking into the room. What you need to understand is your perspective, how you might come up with your own ideas about how the world works. And if you know that, you will be able to succeed. Now, another very important thing we emphasize in international conferences is leadership. Now, leadership is an overused word, but I actually want to spend some time here because I think it really illustrates the model of building a Model UN team here. So, of course, in-committee leadership matters. It's difficult to emphasize this enough, but you'll be asked to work with someone who is just as smart as you, just as dedicated as you, just as well researched as you, and just as enthusiastic as you. These people will be from places you may have never heard of. These people will be from schools that may have, a years-long, if not decades-long Model UN program. But working with these people, gaining their trust, demonstrating that you're in it for the right reasons, and you're someone they can work with, you're someone they can get along with, is an incredibly rewarding task because, frankly, it's exactly what we need in the real world. In the real world, whether you go on to college, a job, a position in government, all these sorts of things require meeting people on short notice and doing difficult things with them. And I assure you, there are few things as difficult as, in the scope of 20 hours, creating a comprehensive set of speeches, resolutions, and conferences and discussions of an idea you might have in Model UN. So that's important. But I think what's also important is building a Model UN community at your school. So I ran Harvard Model United Nations in Boston. We see about 3,600 people attend our conference over the course of 4 days, Thursday through Sunday. And what we typically see is, come about Saturday, half the students will sort of stop. They'll still show up, they'll still wear suits, they'll still raise their hands, but they won't really be trying. They'll sort of give up. And what we've discovered is the reason for them doing this isn't necessarily that they're lazy, they're not smart, they're not dedicated. There are all these things. The reason why they do this is because they don't necessarily have a team behind them that can keep them going, keep them interested, and keep them engaged. Now, Model UN will be very tiring, but for these schools, for the programs that tend to do well consistently at Model United Nations, what we see is actually pretty consistent. We see a program where certainly leaders are extremely interested in connecting students with one another in meaningful roles and in roles that inspire a sense of mentorship and community. Because when you have a sense that you're not here alone, you've got your team behind you, you will do that much better at addressing the challenges of Model United Nations. In addition, one of the real benefits of this team is connecting each other to perhaps someone who knows more about a given topic. Model United Nations will likely make you grapple with the topic with which you know very little about. That's the fun of it. But if you have a team, if you have a sense of who you might reach out to talk about, say, nuclear decay, or who you might reach out to talk about environmental protection, or who you might reach out to talk about tribal politics in sub-Saharan Africa, if you have that, your team will do that much better at addressing the challenges put in front of you. But the third and perhaps most important aspect of leadership within the context of the Model United Nations team is building a culture where certainly the leaders, but actually every student, is comfortable reaching out to other students and saying, hey, how was today? What went well? What didn't go well? What can I do to help? And it's this notion of community, this notion of building a common bond that can really make a Model UN program that much more successful. Because when you have those ties, when you have that sense of belonging, community, and power, That's when you'll feel empowered to do your best within Model United Nations. So when you set about later today to start crafting your Model United Nations team, keep in mind this notion of leadership and think about how you might best foster it at your school. With that in mind, I want to move on to some specific lessons about Model United Nations. And the first one I'd offer is thinking about how you might build a Model UN program here. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about it, but Model United Nations and the Model United Nations program tends to really be the defining factor between delegate success and, I don't want to say delegate failure, but delegate frustration at a Model United Nations conference. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. We already talked about spirit and mentorship, but one of the things we may not have talked about is this notion of expertise. By building up a Model UN program, certainly thanks to the efforts of a group of dedicated teachers, but also through the efforts of head delegates and other leaders in your community, you can build up a knowledge of what it takes to do well in Model United Nations, but also build up a knowledge of what it takes to keep these values going, keep the spirit going, keep this notion of community going year after year after year. And that's incredibly valuable. Understanding exactly what might build a community in Model United Nations and how to keep it going is the most important thing you can do to keep your school successful and keep your school engaged with Model United Nations year after year. So, to build a program, the first thing is experience helps. There's very little that I can say that would equal the power of attending a Model United Nations conference. The first step really is to build up a sense of what exactly is involved with Model United Nations. I can sit here and lecture you all day, but I still wouldn't be able to tell you exactly the dynamics involved with Model United Nations. Because of that, there are some students here who have already attended a Model United Nations conference, and they would be good first resources. But even in your program's early years, just making sure that your program has a sense to go out there and try things out in Model United Nations, that's really one of the most important things you can do. Shared team values and creating a sense of community is also really important, because if you share a common bond, it will first help you attract talent, right? It's a lot easier to say, join the Model United Nations team because we are the community that does something. At Harvard, it's join the Model United Nations team because we are the community on campus that cares most about international affairs and will work the hardest to make you the best student and the best learner about international affairs you can be. That's our message. I've seen other schools do it a little differently. Join Model United Nations because the community we create on campus is unparalleled. We care more about you, we will work with you more to take you through good times and bad, and we will leave you a better student at the end of the day. Other programs might emphasize leadership. Join Model United Nations. We will craft you into a leader who can bring people together on short notice, but very effectively. I don't know how you will want to define yourself. This is one of the most fundamental tasks you all will need to decide in the first years of your Model United Nations program. What sets your community apart? What makes you unique? That's a question I can't answer. But that's a question that you, collectively, by working through Model United Nations, really figuring out what values might hold your team together, that's how you might find success. Research resources are also important. A Model United Nations team that has existed for a while will generally have a series of essays on various topics. At Harvard's Model United Nations team, we asked all students interested in serving in some leadership role to contribute an article to the little encyclopedia of Model United Nations we are building. And it also serves as a good opportunity to get a sense of, are students interested in leadership really interested in committing themselves to the process of campus? So one of the things I recommend, actually, is asking students who are interested in taking on a larger role in your club to contribute to an encyclopedia. Write up an article on the Straits of Malacca, or the geopolitical dynamics of famine, or the nature of cyber warfare, or just any topic that might be involved in Model United Nations. And that will really be an extraordinary opportunity to build expertise, build community, this notion of substantive depth, real deep engagement with the problems at hand, that will set you apart when it is time to raise your placard into the speech. Mentorship we discussed earlier, and funding and logistics and travel will thankfully be handled by your extraordinary staff. But generally speaking, it is worth keeping in mind both of these things because the logistics of Model UN are never simple. Model United Nations can be difficult to attend just because these conferences are often far away and they require a set of principles. So I will just take this opportunity here to highlight that when you're selecting leaders, when you're selecting values, it's also important to think about who will keep track of the little things, who will be the best coordinator, who will make sure that all the little things go right. Because at the end of the day, Model United Nations is really tiring, and no one's going to have energy for the little things unless you pay attention now. So, with that in mind, the final thing I would urge you to do is build a program that is durable. Model United Nations can just be another club. In fact, I see many schools just do it that way. Model United Nations is something you do alongside perhaps math, bicycling, football, and 100 other things, and that's fine. But I think one of the things that could really differentiate the extraordinary Model UN programs from the ordinary Model UN programs is building passion. Building a sense that, yes, Model United Nations is not only something I do, but something that I enjoy, something that drives me. And the way you do that is never simple. It starts with shared values. It starts with building a sense of community. But what can really take the sense of passion to the next level is the leadership that is involved. Because a good leader, a good head delegate in Model United Nations will be able to reach out to you and really give you a sense that not only am I doing this, I'm going to have fun. And I'm going to let this experience build me as a student, as a learner, as a person. And I think that last aspect is very important. So if I were to summarize my advice to you as you begin to think about exactly how you will inaugurate your program, I recommend selecting leaders who have a clear vision for what they want and a clear vision for the values that your community might hold dear. I recommend trying to find a leader who understands what is involved with instilling passion, instilling community, and instilling drama. And I recommend that your community think very seriously about how you will instill a sense of substantive depth and passion for academic research that will serve you throughout the years your Model UN program is active. With that in mind, I wanted to take this opportunity to briefly consider an exercise in Model United Nations strategy. So, in Model United Nations, we have these things called position papers, right? A position paper is a document where you outline your beliefs, your country's beliefs on a subject. And the most important thing in Model United Nations is to start with the background guide. Every conference will create a background guide which sort of describes the director's thoughts on the problems at hand. If you'd like to read Harvard's, the password is listed on the slide. But the background guide is only the first step.